When you look at the evolution of artificial intelligence since, let's say, the 1980s, how do you think has the perception of AI changed?
Right. So in the 80s, there was a movement toward artificial intelligence. And I was in graduate school at the time, and I put all my elective hours into it, and I wrote a thesis report on it. And I started studying artificial intelligence at the time. And what I found was you needed a tremendous amount of data in order to make that work. And you also needed quite a bit of processing power. And in the mid 80s, we were working on, medium-sized PCs, and that market was just emerging. So there wasn't really a lot of processing power available to us, and there certainly wasn't a lot of data available to us. And AI was very particular about what problems it would solve. Unless it broke down into a very nice tree structure, it really didn't solve it very well. And companies came out with very specific tools like knowledge engineering environments, symbolics, and these very specialized machines and languages like Lisp and Prolog to solve the problem, but they were very arcane, they were very difficult to use. So with a lack of data, with a lack of processing power, a lack of easy to use tools, artificial intelligence didn't go very far. It solved a few issues. It did well with natural language back then. It did well with a couple of other sectors like expert systems and knowledge-based systems, but they always solved things that were very well-defined problems already. If there was any qualitative requirements, it did not do well at all. And so it didn't go very far, and eventually the industry shut down. The other thing I found was that most artificial intelligence projects suffered from a PR problem. Back in the day, if you could solve it with our AI, it was no longer AI. At that point, it was something else. And so any wins that AI may have achieved in the 80s, they lost very quickly because it became its own thing outside the world of AI. And so it was a challenge to get momentum behind it because basically AI was anything you could not solve. And nobody's investing in things you cannot solve. They only invest in things you can solve because they want to make a return. So I always thought that was kind of interesting that AI would set themselves up to fail because basically if it was a winner, it wasn't on their balance sheet. If it was a loser, it was, they were stuck with it. And they were just challenged with, limited power, limited data sets, and limited tools at the time. Well, today there's plenty of processing power. There's more processing power than your mobile phone than there is in the space shuttle. So the idea was there's a lot more technology available for people to use as well. There's also a lot more data sets. There's over 14,000 data sets on the open market out there that people are now accessing and working with and so forth. So having a rich set of data makes a much different use case for how you might work with it as well. And the tools have gotten a lot more sophisticated. The languages and the processing software is much better at working with large data sets and pulling together machine learning tools to make these more reasonable applications. So the tools are just at a much higher level. So people are going to get a lot further with the applications this time than they did last time. The question remains as to how people in the AI industry treat AI solutions. Do they treat them as scientific experiments like they did in the 80s, or do they treat them more as business opportunities? I think that was one challenge in the 80s, is that AI was really this science experiment that if you could solve it, it was no longer interesting to us. It was just a standard business application. But now, if we treat it like business applications are the goal and we make good success with it and track how many jobs they create, how much revenue, how many startups they create, and how much wealth is created, they'll do a lot better from a PR point of view. It seemed like the AI was really driven by the academics in the 80s, and so that was one challenge. Is it was always just about pushing the envelope of technology, but investors want more than just envelopes of technology. They actually want returns, they want businesses, and they want jobs, and maybe this round will be a different one. Well, today you see a lot more either applied academics, or you'll see businesses pushing forward as well. A lot more corporations are investing in AI now than I saw in the 80s. In the 80s, it was all universities and it was government research labs trying to do specific applications. But today I see Fortune 500 companies and corporate venture capital putting money into these things to solve real-world business problems, and they're looking for real-world solutions that will probably turn into a more substantial result for the investors. And if you can give the investors a result, you'll get more funding from the investors, and it grows from there.